Happy Thursday, everyone. We're so glad that you've joined us today for our webinar. But before we begin, I just want to go through a quick, housekeeping notes. Everybody is muted, but you do have the ability to unmute yourself if a question comes up when we have some time for Q&A. But I have muted them just for distractions, to avoid distractions. We are recording this session and it will be available on our website under our webinars resource page, and we will also be sharing the recording with you afterwards. I have turned on captions just for accessibility, but if you find that to be distracting, there should be a way for you to turn it off. We will welcome your questions, so you can drop them on the chat as they come to you. Please locate that chat box and drop your name and what organization you're with so we can see, who's joining us today. But we're so delighted to have Randy with us today and look forward to a great and informative webinar. On to you, Randy.
Thanks, Isabella, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today. And yeah, please, as Isabella said, if you could just kind of give me an idea about who's in the room today. Maybe if you're with a nonprofit or foundation, or maybe you work in the public sector. Yeah, just kind of want to make this applicable for you all, just kind of understand where you're coming from. So, okay, cool. A lot of familiar groups there. I see Feeding Tampa Bay. Yeah, it's got a foundation. So I am over across the coast from you all in Jupiter, Florida, which is just north of West Palm Beach. So I will be speaking a little bit today about the topic of technology specific as it applies to the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors. So who am I? I've been working in the nonprofit and philanthropic sector for close to 20 years. I actually had to check that number. When I wrote that out, I was like, geez, it's been that long. Yeah, it's been that long. So have always had an interest in technology. Don't have any formal background or training in it, but always really interested in how can we use technology to advance the work of nonprofits and foundations. I actually published a book on this topic last fall, which I'll talk a little bit about at the first part of the conversation. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but it really kind of frames the argument and the approach that I bring to the conversation around this about technology and some of the things that are emerging. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll go into the presentation. So, all right, let me hide my notes there. Yeah, great. So there you go. So that's the first part. And just in terms of what we're going to do today, I'm going to look a little bit about, kind of my view about where the field is in terms of, a lot of broad things, a lot of things, societal factors that kind of impact the nonprofit field. And then I'll switch and talk about kind of some concrete steps that you all could potentially use to incorporate technology. And we're probably going to double click on AI and how to really kind of incorporate that into your work. And then towards the end, we'll look at kind of, I don't know, innovative strategies or, strategies you can use today to impact your work. If you want more information around like different, strategies you're not going to hear about today and technology that you're not going to hear much about today, you can certainly buy my book, although I'm not going to push that too much, but I will have a slide at the end to kind of talk about, or show you where you can go to get that if you are so inclined. So really today, I'd really like to give you like a couple, maybe 2 or 3 things that you can use immediately if you're not using them next. So you can have kind of some easy takeaways, right, for your time today. So before we jump in, just a little disclaimer. The presentation that you're going to see does contain anonymized survey results. Some of you are going to be familiar with these, having taken the survey before the meeting. I do have some survey results from some of the other presentations that I've done, so put those in there as well. And then the other thing that I also make a point is that any AI tools I use today, and also any of the AI tools that I use are the subscription levels. I use the pro level or the level that requires you to pay for it. I don't use the free versions. And I'll talk a little bit about that later and kind of the impact and some of the things you should consider around that. So sound good? So I'm going to just kind of outline, some of the challenges that the nonprofit sector faces And this, again, you can read kind of more background around this in my book, but it's really just kind of my framework for thinking about why we should seriously think about using technology in AI specifically as well, but really thinking about why we really should be actively thinking about how to use this. So as the way that I see it is the nonprofit sector faces, kind of, five challenges where we are right now. The scale of the problems that we're trying to solve is, climate change, or we're trying to feed large, folks that are hungry, or housing instability. These problems aren't small, right? And they require solutions at scale. The second part is there is just a general lack of investment in technology. And this kind of goes both ways, right? I mean, a lot of the financing for this comes from foundations. But generally, nonprofits traditionally spend about 2 to 3% of their budgets on technology. Compare that to the private sector, which spends 3.5 to nearly 6%. So we're fighting a 21st century fight with 20th century tools, right? And this applies to foundations as well. They're not left out. Surprisingly, when I did some research in researching my book, I found that according to GuideStar, and this is 2020, so it's a little dated, only 10% of foundations had websites, which it's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are small private ones or family ones that don't really need one, but still makes it a little bit opaque. The third thing, and I think probably all of us can relate to this, is just the general administrative overload of working in this sector. Just all the different things that we do. When you look at even a grant application, the average amount of time it takes to complete a grant application is 27 hours. And that's nearly a full week's work spent writing just one grant, not building relationships with donors or doing mission-related work to really create impact. The fourth, there's really no global perspective on the nonprofit sector or foundation level work. The data that we produce every day, all the outputs, all the reports, all the client level data, it really continues to exist in silos within our own organization. It's very difficult to put all that data together to really get a broad view of the impact of the sector. Like, we all know what we do, right? But like more broadly at a global level, it's really kind of difficult to understand what that looks like because of the way our data is kind of siloed and the way that it's set up in our, our CRMs and the different databases that we use for our work. Last one, I talked a little bit about this before. There's just a general lack of adoption that we've sort of been living in the last couple of years. There was a 2022 Salesforce survey, of Salesforce.com survey, which is a large software company, of 1,600 nonprofit leaders across 7 countries. 74% said technology adoption is essential to achieving their mission, but only 12% said they were actually mature in how they use technology. So that's a big gap, and it's a gap that hopefully we start closing today and in the future. So optimistically thinking, what if we could do some of these things, right, that we always want to do? And really thinking about, again, kind of this framework of technology. Imagine building stronger nonprofits that are resilient, data-driven, and able to demonstrate their impact clearly and in real time. The Salesforce data shows that digitally mature organizations are actually more impactful. And I'll show you the report in a couple slides here, but it's actually 4 times more impactful if they are what they call digitally mature. So what if we could also grow our donor base, not by cold calls and email campaigns, but by connecting donors directly to causes through seamless, transparent technology? And what if we could reduce or eliminate redundant grant applications and reporting, and really put that time back into like direct services, right? And we talked a little bit about that before. And then the last part is how can we make data more transparent, accessible to all, so we can drive smarter, more equitable giving across the entire ecosystem? So just some things to consider about what is the possibility. So what's holding us back? Some of these will probably be a little bit familiar with one. First and foremost, the overhead myth, which I know a lot of you are familiar with this, and you probably deal with this all the time. Donors and some funders restrict overhead spending. And too often, technology gets lumped into overhead. So if you can't fund a software license, how can you modernize? And isolated databases is sort of another thing that I see is really holding us back. a lot of the data systems, a lot of the data that we produce, it still exists in silos, either within our own organization or even across the sector of organizations. The data systems don't really talk to each other. It's very difficult to draw meaningful information from all that data. It's hard to synthesize that data. A lot of those are manual processes that we're doing now. There's still understandably some hesitance around AI, and obviously ethical debates are real. There's, but the way that I see, and again, I talk a little bit about this more in the book, is it's really that debate kind of, runs over the, sort of the practical benefits that we can immediately start realizing through some of the technology that we have. The next part, it's a term that I didn't make this term up, but it's just cultural opacity, right? Many foundations are just still operate as black boxes. And, I worked at a foundation for 15 years, and we tried really hard to be transparent and very approachable and be very transparent around decisions we make. And the first half of my career was spent in a nonprofit. So sometimes it's hard, like, well, why are you making this decision? How did you make that grant decision? It seemed like we had a good idea, but it's just the way that it is, right? But I think that opacity, if you will, makes it very difficult to create large scale change in the nonprofit sector. There's also political risk, and we've seen this showing up in the last year and a quarter. I think that this political risk in part stems from the lack of transparency around what it is that we do and what we're doing as a sector. And I think that that lack of transparency only invites regulatory threats. And we've seen this play out in the DOGE hearings and the different hearings that they have at the state of Florida, even the federal level. When it's hard to show, we can show where the money went, right? But when it's not readily available or folks can't really see that, they just jump to conclusions, right? That this is a waste of money. And when I say they, I've got direct quotes of people who are saying this in my book, but I don't want to call anybody out during the webinar, but not that they're on here, but yeah, so it just, it kind of sets us up for vulnerability. And the last part is just the missing investment piece, right? Just kind of figuring out, where the money's going, when it's going there. If you're a foundation and you want to fund a large food provider, is there a foundation that made the same grant 2 weeks ago, right? Sure, you can pick up the phone and call them if you have a relationship or email them, but there are ways that you can create kind of even like a visual representation of these things. So we talked a little bit about this. I think the one part I want to kind of land on is that middle one where we talk about the generational shift. I think this is really important, especially for somebody like me. I'm Gen X, probably middle-aged Gen X, thinking about the future of the sector. Where are our future leaders coming from? Who do we kind of bring up and support so they can continue doing the work that's necessary, right? And those are those digital natives that expect transparency, and they expect exposure, and they expect the ability to use new tools in their job every day, right? They come in to the workplace with that expectation. So, and the other part of that, well, we'll talk a little bit more about the importance of that generation in another slide. But yeah, I think, and if we can't offer that as an organization, or we don't have the tools or the training, then we're going to lose those folks, right? They're going to go somewhere else. Couple more slides in this part, and then I'll just pause, see if we have any questions. Check the time. All right, we're good. Yeah, this is the report I referenced earlier. Again, Salesforce.com, very large, probably one of the largest software providers in the world. They found that 12% of nonprofits are digitally mature. The interesting thing, again, it's 4 times more likely to achieve their mission goals if they are digitally mature. They're also 2 times more likely to improve operational efficiency. I think that goes without saying. And the interesting thing too, when we talk about employees and generational shifts, they're 3.5 times more likely to have highly motivated employees. So in my view, and I think a lot of that data backs us up, technology can help us achieve greater impact if we do leverage that. Just a brief note here. I saw this article came out maybe, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I saw it on LinkedIn, kind of caught my attention because I had assumed that, I don't know, Gen Z, they seem to be pretty adept with technology. Surely they are have a high level of confidence in these tools and understand what they can do. Well, it turns out they're less confident than their grandparents. And I think part of the reason why, and it's my thought, the article talks about these generations under so many different stressors, right? They've got, there's societal, there's different stressors they're dealing with outside the workplace. And then they kind of come into the workplace, and especially in the nonprofit sector, the amount of training that they're getting, or the availability and the ability to use some of these tools that can make their work easier, in some cases can be constrained or limited or not available at all, right? So it's very important that we think about upskilling staff on how we use these tools. Again, really thinking long term, right? Like, how do we support the generation that's really motivated? A lot of them are cause driven. How do we support them and make them feel, welcome but effective in this space? So this quote here basically can be summed up. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It's really just, we have to take this, we have to make this decision ours as a sector to really kind of think about how we advance this. Otherwise, it gets applied to us. And we've seen this before with different things. So, the next part is going to be kind of barriers. We're going to talk a little bit about the survey feedback, but I wanted to just kind of stop sharing for a second, see if we have any questions or any initial feedback here as we're going through. We got a minute or two before I go on. If you need a drink of water or all right, so I'll shift in. I'll keep going here. All right, so now we're going to go into, I guess, shouldn't really be part one, but I guess it is part one. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Here we go. Are you still seeing my notes?
Yes.
Sorry, let me get.
I have to go into.
Let's try that again. Bear with me. I told you at the beginning, I am not have a technology background. My disclaimer. All right, let's do this.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so just the objectives of what I want to get what I want to get out here. I want to talk about some of the barriers specific to you all that completed the survey.
It's back on your notes, Randy.
Oh, sorry. All right, I'm gonna just have to. I don't know why this does. I'll give this one more shot, and then I'm just gonna keep going, and it's not gonna be. I'm gonna have to just do it myself. All right, let's just do that. Bear with me. I won't be reading anymore. I'm just going to be doing this. Come on. Here we go. All right. Okay. We good? Okay. So we're going to talk about some of the barriers, and then I'm going to look at some concrete steps and some things that you can do internally now at your own organization to start thinking about how you can start adopting technology, and probably, again, just kind of double clicking on AI, but barriers and adoption first. I think this is pretty straightforward. I've spoken to a lot of groups and done a couple surveys, and the barriers tend to be the same thing. Folks talk about the lack of time. They don't have enough time to figure out how to use these tools. They're in the process of learning it, but there's really no it's tough to figure out how do we use AI as a grant writer or as your marketing. You really have to learn it by yourself. And the use of AI is somewhat limited. And this goes for nonprofits and foundations. I've actually completed the same survey with foundations, and their level of use and the barriers that they face is really the same as the nonprofit sector writ large. So the other interesting thing is there's inconsistency across departments. So I talked to a CEO and I asked him, is your grant writer using AI? Well, yeah, they're using, Copilot. And then I asked the CEO, what are you using? Well, I'm using Gemini. So we're going to talk about why it's a problem in a couple of slides, but they're using different systems. They're all using it as they see fit, but there's no cohesive use or sort of guidance for how they can use it across the organization. The next part is many people are using free versions, which is is something to pay close attention to and really something that bears asking internally with your team and your staff and considering. Um, the free versions do not have data privacy constraints, really. If you're inputting information into the system, you can really consider that system using that information to train the model. Not necessarily a bad thing, but if you put personal information or identifying information in there, assume it's going out onto the internet, which I know some of you all may have like donor data and different things like that that you don't want out there, right? So again, there's just a general lack of awareness around these privacy concerns. So I try to harp on that a little bit. And then, even the last one, like, well, I tried it and it didn't work. Well, how are you trying it? Does the tool have any context around your organization? Does it have any context around who you are or what you do? And if it doesn't, it's probably not going to give you a very good output, right? So, that's kind of like driving a car, getting in a car for the first time and stalls out and you leave the car and say, well, I'm not using that again because it didn't work very well. Um, okay, so let's look at your results specifically. I had about 15 people last time I checked, which fairly good number. Most of you have moderate understanding. You're familiar with some concepts and applications, which is great. Uh, no one has no understanding, which is good. And a couple people with some strong understanding, which is great. Probably more than me, quite honestly. So the good thing about that is you're sort of kind of ready to learn, I think. So then the next part is asking if you use AI to perform the functions of your job, which one do you use? This continues for, I'm not sure why everybody uses ChatGPT, maybe because it's the first one that came out a couple of years ago and everyone's just stuck with it. The next one is Gemini, and then also folks are using Copilot, and I think pretty obvious why Copilot, right? I mean, it's built into Microsoft, and you can kind of access it right there. I'm going to show a quick demo with Claude and also with Notebook LM. I find these to be the most applicable to what we do within our sector, within the nonprofit and philanthropic sector. I'm going to show you a couple examples of those in a couple of minutes. Let me just check the time now. Okay. So again, this is really important. If you're using any of those and you use the free version, I would encourage you to take a look at that. And we'll talk about some steps you can take and some of the ways to prompt that conversation, but you really shouldn't be using the free versions for organizational work. Use it for yourself, whatever, but those free, again, it's just the free versions take a lot of that data. It's, some of the systems don't have a lot of transparency, quite honestly, around what they're doing with that and how they're using that data. So that's a consideration, right? So, so use the subscription version, and I'll show you a couple example of those in just a second. Anybody using paid versions? I don't know, maybe you could drop that in the chat. I'd be curious to hear what you all are using, if you are. Anybody using Grok or Notebook LM? Great, got a couple people. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Claude. And yeah, Notebook LM is insane. I probably get about, I don't know, 1% of what it's actually capable of doing. So really excited. I've showed that to a couple of clients I have, and it always kind of blows them away. So just kind of zooming out a little bit, I think a lot of the findings from the survey with you all kind of mirror what's happening in the sector broadly. And this is a 2025 report from Chronicle of Philanthropy, where they talked about, how are folks using technology within the sector. Most of the barriers that you're going to see there that probably look similar to, where you are. There's budget constraints. It's very difficult to vet and implement some of the systems. The learning curve is too steep. Folks just don't find the time to do it. The other thing too, though, is the financing and the ability to use the systems and get funding to use them, right? So one of the things that I found quite surprising again when in the survey, and this is when I was researching my book last year. The Chronicle of Philanthropy survey said that there's a woman that said most funders don't even fund technology, and the ones that do, they kind of want to fund like the really really cool new innovative tool that everybody should use. But the challenge with that is, if you don't have updated hardware or software, it's very hard to onboard these new systems. And also, nonprofits feel a little bit of pressure to be able to use this new cool thing that a funder wants them to use, right? Excuse me. So, and at the same time, we talked about this before. If the funder is prohibiting or discouraging the use of grant dollars for general operating costs that include software or cybersecurity services or hardware, makes it a little difficult to use that, right? So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing. Going to go into the next part, which are kind of concrete steps that you can start thinking about within your organization. And sorry, let me. Any questions or comments before I kind of go on? We'll get this that up again. All right, so this is let's jump into concrete internal steps. Okay, these are things you can do. Sorry, things you can do now to start onboarding technology, specifically around even like AI, right? So one of the things that one of the first things I encourage folks to do, and you read this from left to right, just have discussions internally. Ask people, what are you using? How are you using it? Have kind of a discussion that's just sort of open, right? You're not trying to catch people, or it's not a gotcha discussion, but it's, hey, how are you using it? What are you using it for? Start to identify the tools that folks are already using, and then think about maybe identifying like a tool that all of you use. Maybe you all agree, like, okay, we're going to use ChatGPT, and everybody uses that one for their work. Or you say, you know what, let's use, Claude or a different one. And then the next part of that is deciding on what I call enterprise level. And this is deciding like, okay, let's think about subscribing to this tool. Again, depending on what it is, and the prices vary across the board. But again, I recommend subscribing at the enterprise level for the whole organization. And then the next part is, and kind of a little bit concurrently, even starting to think about a usage policy. What are key questions that you want to look at for your organization? Like, what's the privacy? What data do we put in here? Who's using it, and kind of what do they use it for? But just sort of those key questions. I'll give you some examples of those in a second. And the last one is organizational capacity. Kind of where you are as an organization to think about these. So this is again kind of like some internal steps. Start by asking your staff. Look at vetted resources, which you really have to do that yourself. You can do some research on your own. Start experimenting with simple tasks, especially if they're a little hesitant or they're not really sure. Edit a document or edit an email or have it write you an email, just something that's not personalized, right? And then the last part is we can't wait for a playbook, right? We really should be using, start moving our staff to experimenting and figuring out how we can use these so we can make our work more efficient. And there's a lot of great places online where you can go. They'll give you, step-by-step process to take to develop your own playbook. But I think that's something that bears attention to.
Randy, I don't know if you're meaning to share something, but we can't see your screen.
Nope, you can't. Sorry. Yeah, I don't. Sorry, I'm having so many issues with this. Let me just close a couple things here. Okay. Are we back?
Yes.
All right. We talked a little bit about these, the privacy and confidentiality. Some of the don'ts. Don't assume that free tools protect your data. Don't share donor data or grantee information or confidential financial details. All pretty self-explanatory. So I pulled up just a screenshot of ChatGPT pricing levels, since that's the one most of you are using. Obviously, you can use the free one, but the couple options that are available to you as you go through. The next one, Go, is probably more individual. The plus one is probably something more for maybe an organization, and they do have the pro level, which is probably for an enterprise version, right? But when you go to these, doesn't matter which tool you go to, they're going to tell you what you get with that level of subscription, right? So some of the cool things here, especially if you're not using the free version, the paid ones, you can have long chats. They'll remember them. They'll remember the past conversations that you had with it. And this is really helpful because it saves you time from going back in and providing background to the tool. It can just go right in. You can ask it a question, and it'll give you give you the output. And then the other part of this is just, think about updating our hardware. Obviously that's an expense that you have to budget for, but you can't use some of these tools on outdated equipment, right? And fortunately, they're changing so fast. You've really got to have kind of, things that are within the last, operating systems that are probably within the last 2 or 3 years to really leverage them. Most of you are probably familiar with Microsoft. The point of this is just to show, like, here's something that's already embedded into probably what most of you are using. And if you're using Google, then you could access Gemini, which is the paid version of Google's tool. That works really well with the documents. Really nice interface, very easy to use. Really, if you're not an expert like me, you can kind of figure out how to put them all together. So again, just kind of closing out this section, going from user to beneficiary. Make sure you use your paid tools, use your enterprise versions. And once you get to that point as an organization, then you can start thinking about like a master prompt and putting some information in there that will really help the system give you more meaningful responses. Some of the things that I advise, especially with foundations, is allow people to spend money on technology. Allow them to up their budget for that, right? If you're thinking about like, okay, well, how do we build our expertise? Well, think about like some folks on the board who have either tech expertise or maybe tech background. They can be your ally as you come forward and say, hey, we need to increase our budget for this software or our hardware. And then I'm not going to talk about the last one with blockchain for transparency. A lot of really interesting things that can come out. The financial system's using a lot of different things around that. I think there's a lot of possibilities for us, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So just remember, start small, protect your privacy, use AI to enhance, not replace your expertise, right? Think about your equity and values and center those as you're developing your policies and procedures, and be patient with yourself. You're going to make mistakes. There's a learning curve, just fine. So the last part is current and emerging technology. I'm going to pause just a second, see if we have any questions. Isabel, I'm not touching my screen, so you're going to have to tell me if there's any questions in the
Yeah,
chat. Yeah, so
no worries.
this part is I've got a couple demonstrations, and basically what I did is I just made some videos of some of the quick things because I don't want a lag with inputting and then you all waiting. So I'm going to show two different. I'm going to show Claude, and then I'm going to show Notebook LM because again, those are my two favorite ones. So, and then we'll talk a little bit about maybe some other technology if we have time. So yeah, so I mean, I think it's pretty obvious when you sort of sit back and you think about what AI can do in terms of grant writing. If you're a foundation program officer and you're conducting due diligence and trying to read a 990, an audit, you want to search for any good news or bad news about a nonprofit you're considering, the due diligence process is so much easier using some of these tools actively and with boundaries and with some constraints, but there's a lot of opportunity there. Large language models we'll talk about in just a second, but this is where you start creating institutional memory within a system that you can draw from. So this is Claude, if you all haven't seen this. So basically the reason it's got my name there because I use the, I guess it's the pro version. I pay, I think it's $200 a year. If you look up here on your up to the top left there, you can see the little chats. It's got little file folders. I'm not going to pull those up because some of those are unique to my work and my clients. So the great thing about this is, though, I can go back in there and reference those, and I can continue a chat from 2 weeks ago if I have a question about a document that I was looking at. All right. So this one I really like using. So see if I can. Yeah, so just a quick demo. So, we talked about, using enterprise versions and agreeing on everybody using the same one. So the next step from that is developing what's called a master prompt. And basically a master prompt is, it's basically a document that includes your organization's mission, vision. It might include some reports, maybe your grant applications. And you take this information and you put it into your system. Again, one you're paying for, not just anyone, the one that you paid for. You put that in there, and then every time that you go to that, in this case, Claude's going to draw and use that information to answer you. So the outputs you get are unique to you. They're not general. They're not pie in the sky or something you found on the internet. It's unique to you, right? So I just wanted to, kind of explaining that, but also thinking about so you can go to the tool as well and say, how do I create a master prompt for my nonprofit organization? And it will tell you how to do that, right? So obviously it already knows me. That's why it's got my name there. But the master prompt is really like kind of a standing briefing document. Tells who you are, your voice, your text, your contacts, establishes your organizational identity. It gives a system about a good idea about what sort of audiences you're presenting to, who's your key stakeholders. And this will help the system tailor the response specifically to you. Okay. So these are, so you think about, and it's got some great tips there and little template structure for coding, which I'm not quite there yet. So next thing I'll ask it, and again, you can just kind of play with these systems and, okay, so what do I need to upload into the system to help create a master prompt, right? And it'll tell you what you need. And a lot of this information is the stuff that you use. Like if you're a grant writer, you're using your foundational document, you're using your evaluation reports. You can even upload your website into the system and it'll read your website and it'll pull data from there and information from there. So the great thing is if you're a marketing person, you can go into your system that you're using and pull maybe an overview of your latest report that you want to send to your donors. So you can pull recent reports or recent information about your organization and use that. Even with your board, if you're putting together a board update on what you've been doing in the last 2-3 months, you can go in there and use it for that same thing. All kinds of different uses for this. So, and the other thing about it, you want to make sure you've saved the master prompt and know and let folks know where that document is. Just get creative, thinking about how you can use it across all these different things that you're doing, descriptions of events, donor appeals, grant narratives. Yeah, there's just a lot of cool opportunities once you start doing that. And really, that's like you hear about LLMs. I see the master prompt as a creation of you're creating an LLM for your organization, right? This is something where all your records are stored, kind of the brains, if you will, of the organization. So you can pay somebody $50 to develop a master prompt. I don't think you need to do that. The system can help you do that. It'll walk you through the process. It's interesting when you see all kind of different businesses that are developing using some of these different systems. This is sort of a visual of what an LLM is. And think of the LLM as someone who's worked at your organization for 20 years that has a lot of information from you that you can go and you can ask them questions and you can ask them updates. You can ask them to produce information for you. There's just a lot of really cool things we can start using these for. So I think you all probably know about AI agents. I'm gonna just skip through this next part. I love, the easiest way for me to think about this is just think about an AI agent as that new hire that's super eager to learn, questions, wants to do work. Just ask them, tell them, like, this is what I need. I need you to put together a newsletter. I need you to use XYZ. Here's a couple examples. Go do that for me. This is, that's kind of an AI agent. And you just, well, we won't do that one. I'm going to go to Notebook LM. I was going to use another example here, but you can see, so basically I uploaded Claude or uploaded my book into Claude from last year. So I can go in and I can ask it questions if I think like, what was that one data point I had? Instead of going through the whole thing, I can just go to Claude, ask the question there, and it'll help me find that. Move through that. Agentic agents, I'm going to just kind of gloss over here. I think the important thing is with these, you have to have clear boundaries about what they can and cannot do. You have to guide them. It's the important thing. They can't be left to their own devices. You really have to guide them and set those parameters for them, and what they do. I use these now for newsletters. You can use them for volunteer management. You could use them for program monitoring and reporting. And again, you have to set up the guidelines and kind of tell it what you need. You give it the information that it draws from, but it'll put together very nice, very nice work outputs. And really ultimately save you a lot of time, especially some things even like volunteer management, scheduling. You can literally just put your volunteer spreadsheet in there and it'll develop your schedule. So real quick here, I know we got a couple minutes left. Yeah, I want to just show Notebook LM. So this is notebooklm.google.com. And this came out, I think about a year and a half ago. Capabilities here are really quite amazing. A lot of visuals, a lot of audio that you can produce from this. So this is the landing page when you go there. And if you look up on the top right, my picture is there. I use the pro level, so I'm paying for this. So anything I put in here, it stays within the system. The other really cool thing about Notebook LM is you can tell it, if you want an answer to something, you can tell it to search the web, or you can tell it just use what I'm giving you, which is critical for this next example here. So let's say you're the program officer, or you're working at a nonprofit and you want to show your board kind of a presentation about the general state of the nonprofit sector today, right? So what you do is you go, we'll go to CEP and we'll pull this PDF report off their website, which is freely available. You download that onto your computer. You save that, obviously. Probably a way to upload it directly into the system, but and then you upload the file after you go back into the system. And if you see over here on the left, it's thinking. It's just that source specifically, that State of Nonprofits report. And then in the middle where it says Untitled Notebook, the system will produce a synopsis. And this is in real time. I didn't speed this up or anything. This is how quick it works. And there you've got a 5, 6, 7 sentence synopsis of the whole report. You can copy that. You can even interact with the system and ask different questions based on the report. I asked about financials. So it's going to go back in there. It's going to give you kind of an overview of that information. And again, it's just drawing from that source itself. It's not searching the web for new sources or new information. Just over here, you can allow it to do that, but it's nice because you get just the information in that report. So it's specific to that, right? So you can do this with your annual report. Do it with your, your needs assessment from the state of Florida. There's just so many different things you can use this for. So the next part is over on the right, and this is where I think it gets really interesting in the studio. So there's a couple different things you can do here. You can have it create an audio overview, which does usually take about an hour to put together. But a really cool thing is just a slide deck. You want to do a presentation on a report, it'll generate a slide deck. And this probably took about, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to switch to a window here and show you the output. I gave it no instructions. I didn't tell it what to do. I just said, give me a slide deck. So we got a slide deck there. And you can see the visual, the graphics are great. I would never be able to put this together with my PowerPoint capability, obviously. And yeah, this is awesome. You could walk into your boardroom and within 5 minutes and have a great presentation to put together for them. All generated from that one resource, right? Not pulled generally from the web. So if you have one resource or one report or even a couple different reports, you can have it do this for you. To answer probably one of the most obvious questions, you can personalize the color. You can have it add your logo. There's a way to do that as well. I just don't have a need to do that right now, but yeah, so you can make it specific to your organization and kind of so it's branded, right? So, all right, I'm gonna just kind of go through a last part. Yeah, just really kind of pointing out the role of foundations in this, right? Being a convener and being a partner in learning, having transparent communications. I know friend of mine who's still in the foundation world, sort of lamenting like all the LOIs we get, they're clearly written by AI. So, we'll talk to each other. Why? Like, do we need LOIs anymore? Right? Like, why are we still doing these? And then think about training and support for your grantees. So if you're interested in learning more about the book, that's a little QR code. It's on Amazon. It's called Giving Reimagined, Leveraging Technology to Transform the Way We Give. And if you'd like to follow me, that's my LinkedIn. My website is randyscheit.com, although that's not really, it's kind of static. LinkedIn is where I post most of my stuff. A couple resources before I go. There's, like legit organizations out there that are providing or information that's tailored to our sector, right? So this is well, I don't have my notes, so I forgot what NTEN stands for. This is the nonprofit technology something something. I just found it yesterday. But again, like some really good information for the field, reports, how to take charge of how you do this. A lot of these are centered on specific values and equity, which is good because I know that's a leader for a lot of you. This group as well, I've spent time with them, and yeah, I found them very helpful. They have kind of step-by-step process you can walk through, and they do talk about the importance of developing a policy, kind of as one of the first things that you do. So another good group to look at. So, and then lastly, my email is there, and yeah, I do conversations like this. I'm doing a presentation at the Sapphire Awards in April. If any of you are going to be there, actually panel presentation, and then but happy to kind of answer any questions or if there's anything else we want to talk about here while we got time.
There's one question in the chat. I can read it for you.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
It says, but aren't the LLMs a weak spot for inaccurate or made up input?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not giving the information for that system to draw from, it is definitely going to give you weak output. If you ask it a general question, it's going to give you weak output. You have to start thinking about informing these models and giving it the information that you want it to use in order to develop what you need. An LLM needs to be specific to your organization. It can't be just general. Like a lot of that stuff's not going to be relevant, right? Like, think about, go back and get all your document, like if you're a grant writer, all the documents that you pull together to write a grant, your 990, your audit, your board list, your financials, like all that stuff, like that is the foundation of an LLM, not, hey, general question into the system, whatever. Like, again, it's garbage in, garbage out. So yeah, it's just something you just have to learn to do, and you have to do it collectively and in order to really kind of leverage that capability of the system. But great question, yeah.
Any other questions? You can also unmute yourselves.
I have a question. Hi,
Go ahead.
Randy. I'm James Joe. I just had a question. How close are, say, like I'm an accountant, say like QuickBooks is to becoming like an Alexa where I can talk to Alexa in a natural voice. It will
Right.
order things for me, it will suggest things. And for QuickBooks, it's not quite there. It's not going to do the accounting. I can't ask, how's my cash flow looking next month, next week, next year, and so forth. So how close are we to becoming, fully like conversational with, these softwares?
Well, yeah, right. It's a good question, James. Yeah, so I think we are already there. It really depends on the software you're using. I don't use QuickBooks, but your software, if you're using Foundant or you're using a specific software to manage your grants or your accounting, you should see if it's got an AI tool built into it. Most of them probably should, and you should start playing with that. The other thing that you can do, and again, you've got to be very, specific about how you do this, but you can take your information from QuickBooks and put it into your tool that you do want to use, and you can ask it information like that. If you have 12 months of financials financials going back 12 months, you could put those PDFs into that system and you could ask them that question, what's our cash flow? What's our cash burn been in the last 12 months? And it'll be able to generate that information. But a lot of those softwares as a subscription, the SaaS providers, they are going to have to start incorporating that in there really now, because folks are starting to see that, like, hey, my Foundit can't give me this level of information. Why am I using Foundit? I'll just use my own system that I build myself, and stop paying for Foundit or QuickBooks, right? But yeah, they should have something built into it. If not already, it should be there rather quickly, I would think.
Yeah, I just think it's not as robust, I guess. It's still kind of in the infancy stage. So, when you're at say a board meeting and someone just throws you a curveball, then I can just say, hey,
Yeah,
QuickBooks, hey, what would
yeah,
be,
yeah, yeah.
so
Well, the cool thing is if you develop your own LLM and you've got your own system that you're using, you can get that answer in real time, right? But so you may have to build a kind of an adjacent system with QuickBooks, or even like I use, think about Foundin or some of those grants management systems. You might have to build an adjacent system so you can interact with it right there, right? Like you can just ask it a question and it'll give you the answer. But those should be coming, and if not, I'm sure behind the scenes, those companies are actively, probably frantically figuring out how to make that happen, because I don't know if you all saw the SaaS apocalypse, they call it, a couple of weeks ago, where people realized that some of these tools now can do the same thing that for, the ones that they're paying for. I'm sure they'll be quickly onboarding some new solutions into those systems. But great question.
There's another question in the chat. Um, do you have examples of AI compliance policies that other nonprofits have formally adopted?
Well, I don't have specific examples. I mean, you could certainly ask and it will generate one for you and pull some out for you. But you'd want to do some research on that. It might give you, if you ask it for 3 examples, it will give you 3 examples, but then it should give you some links, maybe some organizations where they got that information from. You might want to go and, take that next step and kind of do some background research around how it generated that result for you. But yeah, I mean, they'll be able to, they can generate a generic policy, but it's not specific to you. Does it have your values? Does it really reflect who you are as an organization? The answer is probably no. It's probably just a generic output that it's going to give you.
All right, and then one other question in the chat. What are the skills an organization should be putting in new positions to help incorporate AI across all operations?
Yeah, I think it's, really just, familiarity and communication up front. Everybody's using them, as our survey results saw. Just, communicating how we're using them and creating, kind of, I call it kind of space for communication and, internal committee to think about, who's using it there, that's there now. And then even, in your job descriptions too, like asking folks, what level of fluency do you have? Which tool do you use? How have you used it in the past? I think it's really important, especially as you're looking, to bring in new hires, because, once you see what some of these things can do, you'll just expect others to use it in that same way. So it is an important thing to be asking when you're looking for new staff.
Mhm.
And if you're willing, there are also, there's some free certifications. I believe even USF has some free certifications online. There's classes you could probably take from, YouTube, all kinds of different ways to get educated if you're not there yet.
Awesome. Um, some more comments in the chat. There's another question. It's a little bit long. Do you see AI agents specifically limited to completing only discrete tasks in the nonprofit or foundation sector, or doing more than tasks like data analysis now?
Yeah, I do. So there are already folks, um, AI agentic agents specifically can now, once you develop your own, agentic agent, it can actually talk to another organization's agent. So you can just imagine where this is going. You can potentially have agents that do business with each other. If you have a nonprofit that's got its own agent, a foundation has their agent, those could interact. Maybe they can rapidly figure out, is there a match here for funding? There's a lot of things that are going to start developing with this. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, good questions. Any other questions? I know we're almost at the end time. And I know Randy put his email up on the screen if you want to, follow up with any questions. I know some people are sharing about a working group regarding AI resources. So that's awesome. I'm going to be dropping on the chat a few links for other free webinars we have coming up as we can wrap this up today. I just want to give Randy a huge thank you for sharing this presentation with us and your knowledge. We really appreciate it. As I said in the beginning, we'll be sharing this recording with everyone and posting it on our website, as well as the slides and any other resources Randy would like to share. We will also be sending a survey to you, so please feel free to share your feedback with us. But if you have any other questions, let us know, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for the opportunity, Isabella. Thanks for the help.
Sure thing.
Thanks you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.